Ho, ho, ho. Merry Purim, everyone. Thank you. Welcome again to another amazing, fun-filled, and sleigh-filled edition of Interfaithing, Why Families Can Embrace Two Faiths Under One Roof. I am one of your co-hosts, Rabbi Ari Sachs, and I am also in this regard, little Santa Claus, in fact, which if you are watching us on YouTube, you will get the full effect of it. But I am in my Purim costume that I did with my family this year as Santa Claus, which we'll get into. And here joined by the most amazing, wonderful creature of the, how do I put it, of the world of imagination, known as Reverend Anna, the unicorn. Hello, unicorn. How are you today?
Hello. I know. Once again, if you all are not watching this on YouTube, or if you didn't see the social media posts going along this episode, please do yourself a favor, if only to laugh with us, because I had too much fun putting this costume together.
Yes. Why don't you please, Anna, regale us all,
Explain.
especially for those who are just listening,
Who are
with
just
your
listening.
particular costume.
Yes. Well, I am a unicorn, the mythical, magical creature that I feel like has had a resurgence in recent years. I know a lot of my little god babies who love dressing up as unicorn everything, even on a day-to-day basis, not just at Halloween and other times. So I do have on a little headband with my unicorn ears and a pink tuft of hair, and of course my gold unicorn horn. And very strategically applied makeup in order to make my face look
very unicorn-ish. Yes.
Yeah, including a purple nose and glittery nail polish on my cheeks for extra emphasis.
It's incredible.
If that description sounds worth it, either head over to YouTube or head over to Patreon, where you may be able to see
some of these clips, especially.
Some of these clips.
Wait, but you also have something else on your nails.
I do. I almost forgot. Thank you for remembering. I also, of course, had to do contrasting silvery blue and pink nails as my hooves, if you will. My unicorn hooves.
Very mythical.
Maybe this
very
is the
magical
screenshot.
as well.
And then I have all this extra long hair. That's just my natural hair, but we're going to call that my mane.
I also think that my favorite part about your outfit is, or about your unicorn gear, is the shirt. That it is a regular shirt, especially unicorn oriented, especially for our podcast today.
Yeah, mostly because it's pink. But it's my Dolly Parton t-shirt, and she makes me feel magical. So I turned the screen print inside out, but I had to make sure that I also had on a pink shirt.
Amazing.
To complete the look.
Oh, this is incredible. So I want to let everyone know that you should definitely check us out on YouTube and also on Patreon to take a look at Anna's take on the mythical pink unicorn who is making a comeback today. One point I just want to share is that our family emblem on Rachel's side of the family is our spirit animal is the unicorn, because their maiden name is Einhorn, which in German is unicorn. So
that is
we've got unicorns everywhere too. It's
on
perfect.
Your that's like your family crest.
Which, by the way, I think that this interfaithing piece is so perfect then, because in many ways, my get right. Which thank you to Amazon for being able to really bring Saint Nick into our Jewish household. That during the holiday of Purim, our family decided to dress up as characters from all of the other holidays we have. So I am obviously Santa Claus. I've got my bag of gifts right over here.
No, that's amazing.
To make sure that all the nice kids get what they want for Hanukkah, Christmas, or Purim, whatever it is that we're celebrating right now. St. Patrick's Day coming up.
Exactly, all the things.
And then, so Rachel was dressed up as the Easter Bunny. So Santa Claus married to the Easter Bunny. And Jonah was dressed up as a leprechaun.
That's so cute.
Perfect. And Lila was dressed up as Cupid. So all the holidays, but thinking about it from the non-Jewish holidays, which is A lot of fun to be able to engage in, part of,
That really is.
wanting to be a part of the larger culture, but also proud of our Jewish heritage that there's a Jewish place to be able to dress up like this. And by the way,
Yeah.
just as one side point, if you go to certain ultra Orthodox communities, especially in Israel, for the holiday Purim, many of the little kids are dressed up as Santa Claus. It is the cutest
I
thing.
I'm so glad you said that because years ago, in one of my first years teaching for the interfaith community of New York, I think this was right before you and I taught together, my co-teacher used that as an example that
Really?
yes, that there was a photo from like, I don't even remember when, the early 2000s or something of a Hasidic family, I believe. I don't think they were in Israel. I think they were here in, probably like Brooklyn. But it was a photo of a Hasidic family all dressed up together, all as
Mm-hmm.
Santa Claus.
All as Santa
And so,
Claus.
yeah. And so he used that in the lesson as well,
That's so
like
fascinating. That's so
way back then
fascinating.
with the IFC when we
Yeah.
were also doing a lesson on Purim that year. So I kind of saved that because you told me you were going to dress up as Santa Claus. I was like, oh my God,
Okay. Well, we're
I
we're
have
bringing Saint
another.
Nick back. We're bringing Saint Nick
Yeah,
back.
bringing
And
it back.
also, by the way, just so everyone knows, I still have my kippah on top
There
of
you go.
my head.
There you go.
Still representing the Jew. And the other piece I just wanted to share on all of this is that we're trying to figure out what our family costume name is, because at our synagogue they had a special presentation of all the costumes and different
Not like a
costumes would win.
contest, but
We called ourselves the Treif Holidays, or I like to think about it afterwards as the Treif Holidays. Treif is the Yiddish
holiday.
word for not kosher.
Yes.
So in thinking about all the different holidays, what they have in connection, coming from originally for either Christian or pagan traditions, that it is, you don't just necessarily do it as Jews, but at the same time, the idea that we can have fun and engaging with the traditions that are around us, which I think is part of
Absolutely.
that interfaithing idea overall. So it
Yeah,
was an
and
absolute pleasure. And my mother-in-law also dressed up. She joined us, and she dressed up as a witch from Halloween. And then
nice.
she took a video of me reading the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, which is the story of Purim, of the story of Esther and Haman. And then she wrote a note to all of our family members and said, I would never expect in
Adorable.
a million years to have heard the Megillah from Santa. And yet I
Santa,
was able to make sure that happened for her.
that's just amazing. That's absolutely incredible. I love that.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes, I have to share really quick. If my unicorn somehow had not worked out, my backup costume
Mm-hmm.
was going to be the Space Jam, the LeBron Space Jam jersey from
Nice.
the Space Jam remake a
Okay.
couple years ago, which was actually my husband's costume for Halloween one year. And I was going to give like an homage because it's almost Final Four,
Oh, nice.
NCAA, like
It's that
basketball
right time.
tournament vibes if I had to.
Okay.
But I really wanted to be the unicorn.
I'm glad you went with the unicorn theme. It
I'm
really
much
works.
happier being a unicorn.
So we really hope that you're able to see this outfit, so that so that we know that it was worth it, as opposed to just talking about it, but like we got dressed up for a reason. And so again, check us out on YouTube or also on Patreon. And so just to kind of give everyone an update about what's happening with the rest of this episode, the first thing we want to just talk about is kind of a move that we're making when it comes to our work with Patreon and also with the podcast overall. You can go into YouTube and check this out. And then it will be one of our final ones in which we have a full episode going out onto YouTube, because beginning with next week's episode, we're going to be adding in some advertisements that are going to be our programmable advertisements. They're kind of run automatically, happen once over the course of the show. So we encourage you to be able to listen to them. They don't necessarily are going to be ads that we have chosen, but based upon certain kind of parameters, and to be able to listen to it. And that by virtue of listening to it, that you are going to be able to support the show. In addition, we are also creating ad-free episodes of our podcast. And those are going to be run exclusively for our Patreon members. Both free members as well as paid members will be able to listen to ad-free episodes, as well as being a part of our extended interfaithing community, to be part of our Zoom events and other offerings that we do to help families continue to be able to engage with both traditions in an interfaithing way. And we have one of those sets of Zoom events coming up in 2 weeks. In fact, it is going to be on March 24th. There's going to be one event at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, this is through our Patreon, that it'll be a chance to talk about the next 2 holidays that are really coming up on the Jewish Christian calendar, Passover and Easter, as well as a chance for people to get to know each other. And then we have a second one of those events happening on that following Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So that these are again opportunities for us to be able to meet you and to meet us and to meet fellow families who are engaging in this work. And we're going to have a little bit of fun with Passover, with Easter, maybe have like a fun trivia thing, check out what people are doing to celebrate those holidays. So it's really going to be a wonderful opportunity to be able to engage together. So again, come join us for Patreon for those opportunities to be a part of our community, and as well for you to be able to get ad-free episodes of our podcast.
Absolutely. And speaking of things available on Patreon, for some of you that maybe missed our live stream event last year, or if you're relatively new to listening to the podcast, in addition to the events that Ari just described for this year, 2026.
Sorry, Ari's not here. It's Santa now.
Sorry, Santa Ari. That Santa Ari described for 2026, the events on the March 24th and 25th, the live stream recording is still available, correct? But you have to be a Patreon member.
Yes. So you'll be able to get access to a lot of that material, especially by joining us via Patreon at patreon.com/interfaithing.
Yes.
But for today, we're going to be focusing somewhat on the holiday Purim, which passed about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And we had these get-ups on as a way to celebrate what Purim in many ways is all about, which is to have a good amount of fun together, to dress up in these fun costumes, and kind of why Purim is that. We'll be discussing that a little bit, but also because we had promised that we were going to be doing a review of the second season of Nobody Wants This. And as Reverend Anna and I, we were looking into that episode and looking into that show and thinking about what about that show we really wanted to raise, that in fact, there was one particular episode that caught our attention, and it actually had to do with dressing up for Purim.
Yes, it did.
That's what we're going to be discussing a good amount. And so there, just as a spoiler alert, if you have not watched Nobody Wants This, that we are going to be sharing some of what goes on, especially towards the end of the show. So if you really want to know, then you can pause our episode, binge the show, and then come back to us later on. So that is your warning, your trigger warning for what we're going to be talking about today. But one of the things about this particular episode that is relevant for thinking about the overall story of Purim, and they do mention this in the show, is the reason for dressing up. Purim is a holiday where things are like topsy-turvy, where things go differently than expected. On one hand, the Jews were threatened to be destroyed, and then the Jews eventually were saved, and actually they became the ones who rose up violently against a population that was going to be violent against them. In addition, you have this sense that because it was a day in which things go topsy-turvy, that there are these different kinds of feelings that often don't get shown or often don't get seen. So for a Jewish population that lives in a diaspora where they had to be very careful about what it meant for them to be Jews, this was an opportunity to actually express their Judaism in a very profound way. And moreover, that by virtue of this day be kind of like that topsy-turvy sort of way, it allowed for us to be able to, do things a little bit differently than we normally would. So costumes in many ways are supposed to not really cover our faces or cover us up, but they're supposed to be able to express something about us that we may not necessarily feel yet, or that's within us that we want to try to get out in some capacity. And that actually is a good way to kind of segue into the episode that we're going to be sharing, because one of the main things that is going on with the show, which if you've been following it, you know this, that The two main characters, Rabbi Noah and his girlfriend Joanne. Rabbi Noah is Jewish, Joanne is not, but that the question of whether or not she's going to convert to Judaism is sort of a main idea of the show. And for her, it's hard for her to feel whether or not she wants to be Jewish, or she wants to be, but she doesn't necessarily feel it as a part of her. And that at the beginning of the episode, Rabbi Noah basically says to her that the idea of dressing up is that it's supposed to help with a sense of revelation, to reveal something that's within you that you want to be able to get out. So we're going to kind of pick up the show at that point. But before we get there, Reverend Anna, anything else? Sorry, Unicorn Anna, anything that you want to share as a way to kind of preview what we're about to see?
Yeah, again, spoiler alert, because if you haven't seen the show, oh my gosh, you're missing out. We highly, highly recommend. It's very bingeable. So you're welcome, Netflix, if that means you're going to get some new subscribers just to be able to tune in for Nobody Wants This. This particular episode, and we'll get into it when we share the clip, because you see in sometimes very overt, but also in more subtle ways, what revelation can be. Because I think for a lot of us, we hear that word revelation, or you think that if for a for the topic of a conversion, that there's going to be kind of this big dramatic event. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it isn't. And they're both equally valid.
And I also think it's important to mention here that, especially from an interfaithing point of view, interfaithing perspective, that conversion is something that is done for the purpose of what you want out of your own life. Conversion should not be done for the purpose of forcing somebody or of pushing yourself to the point where you have to convert in order to be in a relationship with someone. Like, that is kind of one of our, I'd say, red lines around our work. And I like saying red lines as I'm wearing this red outfit fully. It's like,
Yes.
how can I have red lines if I'm dressed up as Santa? And I would say that one of the disagreements that I would have with the premise of the show is that Rabbi Noah doesn't feel that he can be in a extended relationship with somebody who's not Jewish unless she converts, and therefore kind of holds the relationship hostage in a way until that happens. And I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with folks who have either gone through something similar, or that from the Jewish parents, that they would want the kid, their child's partner, to be able to convert, as if like that is going to be the sign that they're going to be raising Jewish kids, or they'll be having like a Jewish home. And part of what we've talked about a lot is the positive influence of both sets of traditions on the family unit. It's not only, just Judaism, just Christianity, just Islam, just Hinduism. It's not the idea of just one faith tradition. It's that all the different traditions are a part of what makes an interfaithing household really work. Now, even if one converts, you still have extended family members who are not of that same faith tradition. And there are many aspects of your upbringing, if you do decide to convert, that you still want to bring in, that may not necessarily fall under the premise of the religion that you've converted into. But the point of needing to convert in order to be in a relationship, especially to be in a relationship with somebody who's Jewish, is an issue still, and is one of the things that, we'll probably talk about as we watch the clip, about the challenges of that idea, and also where just being open to the experience of being in a relationship with somebody of a different faith background, that in and of itself is going to change you and is going to influence you. And the extent to which you are open to that experience is one of the biggest parts of what it means to be in an interfaith relationship.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that theme, not of conversion itself as a topic, but the overarching theme, I think, of, again, vis-a-vis revelation, but spiritual identity formation and personal growth, and how and why that occurs in a person's life. And particularly in the context of romantic relationships, like who you were before you met that person is not necessarily who you become in the relationship. And it's also not indicative of who you will always be for the future. So there is like a really interesting process, particularly through the lens of Joanne's character, that you get to see a lot of this. And it's, in a sense, it's like really bubbling to the surface in this particular episode.
So we're going to pick up, we have a number of clips that we want to be able to share. And the first clip we're going to pick, we're going to share is a small little interaction that Joanne has with her sister. They have a very interesting relationship, to say the least. Uh,
Yes.
Many ways, like a love-hate relationship where always kind of judging each other in terms of the relationships that they have. And actually, they're at a point right now where they are feeling that kind of tension. And especially Joanne's sister is upset about the way that Joanne has felt about her relationship with her boyfriend or her fiance. And therefore, it's coming out in the way that her sister is treating Joanne, especially in regards to thinking about this aspect of, well, the only way that you're going to be with him is if you're Jewish. So are you Jewish yet? Like, what's going on with it? Almost as if, like, you just got to choose something and, like, who cares, like, how you feel? Almost as if it is diminishing the significance of that desire to feel that I want to convert to a specific religion. Okay. So we're going to pick it up with them at a Purim party. And just so you know, they particularly that Joanne is dressed as a princess, which you'll hear a little bit about in this particular clip. So hope you enjoy.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, in terms of thinking about this little clip, the thing that really sticks out is the moment in which she said, so, are you Jewish yet? 30, 45 minutes, like as if it's going to happen just kind of immediately. But also, I would not necessarily picture you for the princess type in the sense of, well, why are you dressed like this? And Joanne offers something that Rabbi that Noah mentioned earlier, which is part of like the idea of why you dress up as costumes for Purim, that it is your shadow self. It is a part of you that you may want to express or you feel you have, but that nobody sees it yet. And she's almost trying to manifest it out into the world, right? If she says, if I have my revelation, I want to kind of look the part. I want to be able to feel like that princess at the ball who finds her prince and that I'm ready to be able to make this jump. We can't hear you.
The sister calls this out, that she doesn't just dress up as any princess, but Cinderella in particular. And if you know anything about the story of Cinderella, it's also that the Cinderella herself is a hidden princess because she's
Mm,
forced to act as a servant by the air quotes, evil stepmother figure in the story. But she really is the daughter of a wealthy man and therefore has a claim to being able to be in a relationship with a prince and everything about the story itself. It's so packed, even just in that small clip, without knowing the full context of the show, because some people might hear the phrase like shadow self and actually interpret that as that is a part of myself that I actively try to hide because shadow self includes aspects of my personality that I don't like, right?
mm,
I'm not saying like me specifically, but if a person was saying, if I have tendencies toward narcissism, selfishness, or, traits and habits that you don't like about yourself, that's your shadow side. So
mm.
it's interesting that in this show, the definition of shadow self is provided by Noah. And I think for some people watching the show, it's actually kind of an inverted definition of what the shadow self means for a lot of people.
But I also think that there is an element to it that is true to the Purim story and particularly to the idea of costumes, because the shadow side of the Jews who live in Persia at
Hmm.
the time, and ironically, we're talking about this in a moment when Israel and America are at war against Iran, which is where the story of Purim takes place, and that the great fear that they're going to be wiped out by whatever power is in charge. And so the shadow side is, you know what? We're tired of this. We're tired of people trying to destroy us. We're going to show them that they can't. And in fact, the very end of the story of Purim is very violent, that there are Jews who kill 5,000 of the people who were there, partially because they're actually not, it was the only way to defend themselves, according to the logic of the text itself, that the king sends out a note saying you're allowed to kill the Jews. he can't take it back because he already sent it out. But then he sent another note saying the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. But because it's done so violently, it's almost as if it is an expression of that kind of shadow self of, well, you've been terrible towards us, so we're going to be terrible towards you. And it reminds me a little bit of some of the confusion that folks have around the golden rule. When I've taught to kids, especially my own kids, and talking about, well, what is the golden rule? They often say, treat others the way they treat you. That's not the golden
No,
rule,
that's
but
not.
but it feels like it because it's justice in a way, right? And I think that part of what it means to express your shadow self, especially in the context of Purim, is to allow the personality that you often kind of keep hidden, but that you need to let out. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy, that you're feeling you're always in control. It is known under more Jewish mystical parlance as the Sitra Achra, devilish side, that part of you that doesn't want to follow the rules and wants to use power and use strength in a way that you would normally feel that you should not. And what Purim also teaches is that if we don't let it out, if we don't express it, it's going to consume us from the inside. So
Exactly.
if you bring
Yeah.
that shadow side out in a positive way, and this is not
Mhm.
right, that every year celebrating this holiday, it's bringing the groggers and the candy and the food and having a feast all together and enjoying what it means to be in community. Like that's the expression of the shadow side today compared to what it was in the Megillah, where it was really the kind of the nasty shadow side. But if we won't let it out, it's going to really eat us from within.
Absolutely, and I think that that point is so important, and what I would also really want to emphasize, not just for reviewing this clip, but for the broader conversation, is feeling like you have to suppress a part of yourself is, first of all, just uncomfortable. Like, it doesn't feel good, and that is what community is for, right?
Mm,
That is, personal opinion, the most beautiful part of what being in community allows you to do is create a safe container where you can be your full self. And that includes sometimes having to explore darker, the shadow aspects of yourself because you don't want to become consumed by them. And in the context of the show, if you pay really close attention to those dynamics between the two sisters, her sister is making fun of Joanne because she knows that Joanne is not being true to herself, that she's trying to force something. And part of that is because a big aspect of Joanne's personality, I think that she has to grapple with in the show, is this sense of imposter syndrome.
And related to that imposter syndrome, it's she's entering into this new cultural space. She's entering into, doing all the different Jewish holidays, which we'll get to, is an important part of this season and her experience of them. But that by virtue of coming into this new space, it is hard for her to understand how to live within it.
Hmm.
There's another episode which I find fascinating about this in the season, had to do with Valentine's Day, that Noah really wanted to make it a big thing, but part of what Joanne wanted was to be able to have kind of like time to herself and for it to not be as big as Noah would want to make it. And so part of it is also about learning how to live in each other's spaces, knowing that it may be a little bit uncomfortable. And I will say that one thing about this show that I find really fascinating, partially because they don't really spend a lot of time on Joanne's side of the family from, their cultural traditions. In fact, they actually make fun of it that they don't really have anything.
Right. They don't
They
have it.
don't really
Yeah,
grow
they're
up with anything, but
right.
that it often feels like Joanne has to live in Noah's world and Noah does not necessarily have to live in Joanne's world. Or anytime that Noah kind of lives in Joanne's world, it's kind of like doing his own thing, him doing his rabbi thing, him doing his, this is what I would do in this situation. And so I think part of what I find fascinating of the premise of nobody wants this is that nobody in the families want this because it's forcing the larger units to change. In this case, a lot of that feeling comes from the Jewish side. And I think that that's an important element to kind of keep in mind and where the focus on the last the 2 seasons on her converting is a certain kind of trope around what it means for her to change. But I would have liked to see a little bit more about him changing. And this comes back to, I think, one of the key premises of interfaithing, which is that in order for it to work, you have to be willing to embrace each other's. You have to be willing to recognize the positive influence of each other's traditions on you. But speaking of the parents, and particularly of Joanne's mom, who's a fascinating figure.
Fascinating figure.
Do you want to introduce her?
Joanne's mother is pure comic relief, number one. She's
Mhm.
wonderful. She definitely wants to be supportive of her daughter, and even giving some of the broader context of their family unit, found herself getting divorced from her daughter's father, but then staying in close relationship with them together. He came out and then began. So they got divorced as a married couple because he came out, and yet they remained friends. And so there's this interesting like closeness that you also see occasionally amongst them as a family unit, but also still a lot of tension. And the mother kind of piggybacks on Joanne's relationship. She has her own experiences with Joanne's boyfriend, but through his, career as a rabbi. Like, not for nothing, she kind of turns to him for spiritual advice even when she doesn't really mean to. And she begins having her own experiences and asking herself questions about who she is, and even adopting a faith identity where she didn't really have one before.
Right. And she's somebody who identifies herself as very spiritual and kind of likes to try on different things. Also
Yes.
compared to
Yeah.
Joanne, who doesn't necessarily try that and is trying for
Right.
the first time, but wants to be able to know that it's for sure. And her mom is just kind of goes back and forth. And I think that for Joanne, it feels a little flaky.
Yeah, Joanne definitely feels like it's unserious, that her mom is kind of even gullible in a sense, that if she can be convinced by someone else that this new way of thinking, feeling, spiritual practices, whatever they are, is going to make her life better, then she'll try it on. And so she sees her mother through that very um, quick to commit, but then also quick to change her
To quit.
mind,
Yeah. Quick to
quick to
commit
commit
and
and
quick
quick
to
to
quit.
quit.
Yes.
And so the fact that Joanne herself can't really allow herself to see a difference in her mother. But then you also see it flip to jealousy.
Right. Well, and that's kind of where we're going to pick it
Yeah,
up
that's what's
is
picked
this
up on the flip.
interaction between Joanne's mother and Joanne's boyfriend, Rabbi Noah, and sort of the conclusion that Joanne's mother comes to after this interaction. So we're gonna stop that because I think that the conversation between Joanne and Noah that's about to happen is kind of what we're gonna sort of discuss. Uh, I think especially as a rabbi that this scene is my favorite of the entire show. Like both seasons altogether. This one scene, her reaction to that
Yes.
story of like, I'm
Uh-huh.
Jewish. Like I was there. I'm Jewish is just incredible in terms of just what that moment means. But why don't you get started?
I also have to give big props to Adam Brody for his face. His immediate reaction to her
You
declaration of,
sure it
I'm
wasn't the wine?
Jewish. He's like, what? Um, I don't know if this was on purpose, but I also have to give a quick shout out to the costume design team,
Mm-hmm.
because here's how my brain works. The actress who plays Joanne's mother, whom you
Mm-hmm.
just saw dressed up as Madonna, very specific, these early 90s Madonna with the famous comb bra. That actress was also in the film Hocus Pocus,
Oh
which takes
God.
place during Halloween. And there is a very important scene where the parents are getting ready to go to a Halloween party hosted at the city hall.
Wait,
And
and
it's for
she's
adults
wearing,
only. And she is dressed up as Madonna with the comb
oh
bra.
my God. That's like if I was on a different podcast and was also dressed up as Santa without even realizing.
So again, I don't know if that
Oh
was
my God.
truly an accident or if it was intentional, but big shout out to
Wow.
the costume design and or production team, whoever made that decision, because when I was watching this with Pablo, I had to pause and like scream out loud because I immediately recognized it. I was like, that is incredible.
That's such a gift. It's one of those um what is it called? The Easter eggs, which we should talk about at
Exactly.
another point.
Exactly. Yes.
Like Easter eggs, right?
Yeah. Easter eggs in films. Why do we even call them that? And
Yeah.
anyway, it's so good. It's one of those, I feel like that's how I know that this show is made and mostly for, millennials, people from like your and my generation,
Right.
because
Those
boom,
scenes, yeah.
like the mom from Hocus Pocus and the Madonna comb bra. It's so good. So this scene, I love everything about it, right? The direction of it, all the interactions that you see, the kind of perfect moment in which both daughters walk up and discover their mother in the midst of this spiritual awakening,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't believe it.
Right.
And, as you see toward the very, very end of the clip, what I mentioned a couple moments ago is Joanne is not just in disbelief because it is shocking and seemingly to her comes out of nowhere, but because she's also jealous. She's
Mm.
almost upset that this is happening to her mother, because the first clip that we saw, you can tell that Joanne has built up in her mind that for some reason, this particular Purim party is when she is supposed to have her own personal revelation.
Right.
So Joanna actually is really not just in disbelief, as I said, but she is almost flatly like rejecting, like you're stepping on my toes here. And she's,
Which is interesting because it's what the sister says,
yeah,
right? No,
yeah,
that's
you're copying.
Joanne's
Yeah.
thing. It's not your thing.
Yeah. And again, the sister is kind of playing devil's advocate. She's teasing everybody
Mm-hmm.
about the whole situation, and the sister is very cynical about all of this, right? But they say that. They're like, "Mom, you're just copying us." And
Mm.
so there's a part of it of like, yeah, there's history in the relationship of where their disbelief is coming from, but Joanne is actually really jealous.
Yeah. And coming back to sort of Noah's reaction of, I've never had that kind of reaction to the story where somebody says immediately like that they are Jewish. I think it's important here to also recognize that when we're talking about conversion and what conversion really means, that there are a number of different things that have to be unpacked. One of the most, I'd say the most difficult times, there have been plenty of difficult moments between Jews and Christians throughout history. And we've talked somewhat about this, not a ton, but we've talked about this somewhat. One of those moments was 1492. 1492, the Spanish monarchy, as representatives of Christendom, decided that the only ones who are allowed to live in Spain are Christians, and therefore all Jews must forcibly convert to Judaism. Sorry, from Judaism to Christianity. And that kind of idea of conversion is that you don't have a choice. You do have a choice. You could either pack up and leave or decide to become Christians. And what's ironic about that entire episode is that the desire to make Spain fully Christian and empty of Jews led there to be this group of Jews who who lived in Spain, many of whom officially converted, and many of whom also secretly practiced their Judaism, some of whom did not. But what's also so fascinating is that these group of Jews who are often called Moranos or conversos, depending on one's own way of viewing it. Morano is actually almost as if it's a traitor.
Mm.
They were viewed, these new Christians, in such a negative way that there were still restrictions on this group participating in Spanish society post 1492.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily matter that they became Christians, that they were still in many ways treated as they were Jews.
Hmm.
Which, if you think about that notion of conversion, it's almost as if you are forced to be this way. You're forced to change your religion, your heritage, or to leave your previous heritage to the side because of some outside pressure, one way or the other. Ironically, but one of the earliest terms in the Jewish tradition for conversion is a phrase of the Hebrew word for Yehudi, meaning Jew. It's lehit yahed, which means to make oneself a Jew.
Hmm.
That appears in the Purim story, in the scroll of Esther. When the Jews became very powerful, could fight back against the local Persians, many of the Persians were actually very scared of the Jews. And so by virtue of their fear, they converted. And the translation of that phrase is either they converted or they professed themselves to be Jews. They made them, or say, okay, I'm a Jew now because I don't want you to harm me.
Hmm.
So that conversion, especially on a large scale, is often done from a pressure on the outside, forcing one to adopt something that is new. That outside pressure, in many ways, is the kind of pressure that Joanne is facing. Whether she's facing it from Noah, facing it from herself, facing it from whatever all the other elements that are there, it's from the outside.
Hmm.
They're kind of telling her, you have to be this way. One of the things I have an issue with the show and the way they kind of formatted it is that I felt that the end of the first season, you kind of got her answer to it, which was, I can't do this because I don't feel it and it would be wrong for me to do it.
Hmm.
And then when Noah kind of chased after her, it seemed to be saying, okay, I will accept you for who you are. But then now they're back to this trope
Yeah.
of that, no, he still wants her to convert. And I think that there's even more pressure now because they kind of went through everything already. And that the experience that the mom had, right? That her soul was one that she felt it. That's the kind of thing that happens when you are open to the experience fully on your own without any of that kind of pressure.
Right. Yeah.
There's that kind of that real thing. And it's almost as if, without realizing it, Joanne is trying to convert in the old way of you convert because you're pressured to, so you just have to kind of accept it.
Yeah.
But
Or
that
that it could even be like an academic experience, that if she learns enough and or like goes to enough events and starts behaving in certain ways that it's going to like arise that way, like a formula.
yeah, and it doesn't necessarily happen, which is why I think that the idea of needing to convert for the sake of marriage or the sake of a relationship is that same pressure that, let's
Hmm.
say, the Christians put upon the Jews in 1492 and that the Jews put upon the Persians in the Purim story. And that often happens when it comes to the ways in which conversion occurs, is that it's done in many ways by the sword, or it's done by the you know, ostracizing in many
Hmm.
ways, saying you're not allowed to be a part of us unless you change your way.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's not forget, again, this like competitive, very like this, that dynamic between the sisters is also a
Right.
big element in the room in the show, because there's something about the sister being suspicious of Joanna's budding potential, like not just faith identity, but her decision to say, I will consider conversion. The sister is very suspicious of that and is kind of like, that's not who you are. Where is this coming from?
Mm,
And because of the nature of their dynamic, there's almost this element of Joanne saying, I'll show you how important this is to me, because she wants to prove her sister wrong. And I think for both of them, what's really going on is those types of ways that people begin to shift and change and grow in relationships sometimes is very slow and very subtle, but it's also very scary. And if you watch it from season one, both of them have very, very, very strong personality types that are in some ways rooted in, I'm not going to change myself for a relationship. Number one, you have to
mhm,
accept me as I am. And there are certain things about, stereotypical relationship norms that both of them reject and don't want to have to succumb to in order to be partnered with someone. And that there's this element, I think, of this kind of a religious, very modern version of what it means to be a person in your late 20s and 30s, living in a place like LA, but particularly here in the United States, where being a person of faith is not considered, for lack of a better word, cool, or
yeah,
something that you would like seek to change about yourself because you already know yourself, and on and on and on. So they're like really seeing these things play out in the second season, particularly between the sisters, I find fascinating. And I agree with you. I think there's in some ways a missed opportunity. Maybe we'll see it in the third season to actually underscore the point that Noah himself, as a rabbi, is also being challenged in his own faith identity, and he is terrified to explore that.
Yeah, he is, and it comes out in interesting ways in regards to his new job, which, by the
Exactly. Yeah,
way,
the job.
shout out to Seth Rogen, who makes an appearance as a rabbi. Like, if I'm dressed up as Santa, I think that it's I feel just so vindicated that Seth
Yes.
Rogen and all of his Jewishness is able to actually be a rabbi on screen, and he's great at it. But one
He
of the
is.
messages from his role is that the other approach to Judaism is to just be much more chill and lackadaisical and not as, I want to use the term serious, but just, they're
Well,
not as strict overall about
yeah.
how you
I
do
agree.
the Jewish thing. And in
Yeah,
fact,
rigid.
one of the pieces that he's in an interfaith marriage, and so therefore it shows that, we take it easy here. And that's one of the myths that we were debunking during our first season, that I marry a non-Jew, I marry somebody of a different faith tradition because, my faith tradition isn't something that I care about as much. Ironic that it came from another rabbi here, which is fascinating. But I think that what Noah is really struggling with is, my Judaism is such a big part of who I am,
Mhm.
and I want to share all of that with my beloved. But if they're not Jewish, can I really do that? And I think that part of the messaging is that she needs to change as opposed to his requirement needs to change. But that's where we're going to get to a really fascinating dynamic. We have our final two clips that we're going to kind of run them together just because we're kind of running a little bit close to time. But I think
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. So we'll have a little brief thing to share after the first one. But the second clip also kind of is a follow up to it in many ways. This is about the dynamic between Joanne and Noah's sister in law. So no, and the sister-in-law's story is fascinating in and of itself, especially in terms of her relationship with Noah's brother, what that's like. But that in particular, that Noah's sister-in-law and Joanne have had a very difficult relationship, especially into the
Very.
first season,
Yeah.
where it seemed to be clear that sister-in-law did not like Joanne, especially because Noah's first girlfriend from the first season was one of her best friends. But
Mhm.
that eventually over time they became pretty close and they became good friends, which we're gonna kind of hear a little more about that. But in these two scenes, first in this particular episode on Purim, and then in the final episode, um, the sister-in-law kind of becomes sort of that Jewish voice that isn't about putting pressure. It's more about just kind of calling it as it is and sort of laying out for Joanne like what is happening. Like almost as if Joanne is
Yeah.
expecting there to be these kind of fireworks, almost like her mom had,
Yeah.
maybe in that sense of jealousy as you're talking about, but that the sister-in-law is really bringing to the forefront what Joanne is in the process of experiencing and trying to get her to see like that's also valuable as well. And I think the way that she phrases it in both scenes, in the one here on the Perm episode and then in the final episode, I think are really valuable and is a good way for us to kind of wrap up this review of the show.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. With that in mind, the first scene, we'll touch base on it just briefly, and then we'll get to the last scene. So just very briefly before we get to the next clip, that one of my favorite parts of that interaction is the mom with her
Yes.
ex-husband saying, "Wait, was I there at the mountain?" She's like, "I don't know, but let me check again." And like goes
Yeah.
back to it as if she can go there in a moment. Like if people think that I, as Santa, could be able to be around the world all in a single night, I mean, I guess she could be able to go back to Mount Sinai, you know?
Maybe.
And
Yeah.
by the
I mean,
way,
for her, it was a vision that suddenly she kept saying, "I see it. I'm there. I can see it."
right, it's just there. Which by the way, I feel like I don't know why that Santa has to use reindeer. I feel like Santa should use unicorns. Seriously. In any case, so this last scene, which again, interaction between the sister-in-law with Joanne to kind of make sure we keep in mind what she said previously, the idea of
Yes.
faking it,
Fake
the
it till
idea
you
that you
make it.
kind of already do Shabbat, like you already do these things. Can you just sort of make that happen? That I think should be in the background. First off, because Joanne is saying like, I can't fake it, right? I can't do it.
Yeah.
And and to keep in mind that the sister-in-law is trying to kind of raise up what it is that Joanne is experiencing, feeling, affirming, but also challenging in a way. And then this last scene, Joanne really needs it because Joanne's kind of gotten to that point where she thinks it's over between her and Noah, given the Jewish thing, kind of like where we were at the end of the first season. But now it's a little bit more on her that she's kind of like stepping out. So before we get to, before like the show ends, before the season ends, Joanne has a heart to heart with the sister in law. And I think it's a really important piece for us to kind of really end this review with. And we'll explore that further after watching it. So enjoy. Well, then the end of the montage of all the different Jewish things that she does and that she loves.
Yes.
This was the point of the show that both Rachel and I felt was the most Torah
Mm.
in the sense of, a core meaning and teaching to be able to take away from it, even more than the story of all Jews were at Mount Sinai that the mom really took hold of. And it has to come, it comes back to that last point that the sister-in-law said, that Judaism is really about that feeling, and all of those small things put together, that's the feeling. So I'm curious, Anna, what you think about that, especially from your own perspective and your own position and watching the show, but also in this work that we're doing together. What you thought about that moment?
I found it very heartwarming, as someone who's explored a lot in regard to like faith identity for myself, but also, like being alongside other people as they're also engaging with their traditions and with themselves and what that means. Like, how do you live your life? Is it in big ways or in small ways? And the answer is both are fine. It just depends on what works for you. And I think, that's what I was touching on in kind of like the preamble to the clip with the mom. And even before we got into any of the clips, like a lot of people I think assume that this notion of revelation is a big dramatic event. And it can be. And if it happens that way, that's beautiful. Enjoy it. And I also think for so many of us, it's having the revelation that these small experiences knit together create this beautiful encompassing blanket that you just have wrapped yourself up in. And it may not be the big dramatic singular event, but your life has been changed. And now it is a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I love the notion of, the sister-in-law and even the metaphor I just used of like the comfort of that feeling. That's safety. That's, that almost indescribable feeling that comes across as warmth, that comes across as you don't have to explain it. It just is. It's a part
Mm,
of you now, and it comes through in who you are because other people are able to reflect it back to you.
mm, yeah. And that's what's so important about being able to do that in community and in
Mhm.
family as
Yeah, and
well.
for our interfaithing families, again, it's like, however your lives knit together, like
Hmm.
whatever that blanket ends up looking like, the, culmination of both traditions and the ways in which you as families and you as couples will figure out what's important to you. Yeah, it's like, it's a quilt, right? A patchwork quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Every patch is distinct and they have a story to tell and they have a beautiful meaning and emotional connection, and they serve the purpose of being a part of a broader whole.
Um, the, the one of my favorite phrases from the High Holiday Liturgy that's actually stitched by my mom on my special tallis, my special talit prayer shawl for the high holidays, is a combination of what is both written in Torah and also a rabbinic interpretation of Revelation, which is, and a great sound of the shofar shall be blasted, and a still small voice was heard. The concept that Rabbi Noah was talking about, that everyone was at Mount Sinai, is that everyone experienced the revelation of God at Mount Sinai. Everyone had that moment. But what is that moment? Is that moment that kind of epiphany, as if it's like this sense of fireworks or absolute clarity? And for some, it is. But for many others, it's just kind of like that little voice that you hear almost as if it's background and you might miss if you don't pay attention to it. And what the small things are here, right? That the great voice is all of the Jewish experiences that she's having, but what she's really feeling are kind of like those small moments within them. And that's what she's really connecting with and really finding that sense of real deep appreciation for. And I think that in many ways that's what really spoke to me about the Torah, the teaching in that moment. One of the other pieces here, though, that I want to kind of raise in terms of the sense of this being a process of conversion is one, the idea of, and sister-in-law kind of references it, that you be a good get for us. I've had conversations with people who converted that, now the Jewish people have like, I'm going to be able to be supportive. I'm going to be able to, we get somebody like from a different background to be a part of the people. And I think that's one of the reasons why the term conversion is so important, is that from a Jewish tribal sense, like as a people, that conversion is a way to say, I'm a part of you, right? I'm with you. Whenever I've had one of my conversion students who's now starting to become a rabbi, that moment for her was when she went to the Holocaust Museum and she felt that it was her people that she was looking at, not just kind of pictures of people who had died in the Holocaust. And so, what that really kind of emphasizes to me is that the piece around conversion is often the piece of, are you in or are you out? So, if you feel it, that you are in. And if you don't feel it, if it doesn't really connect with you, then you're out. And that's why we want to do that aspect of conversion. But here's the problem with it. And this is one of, I think, I think that the idea of conversion was a way to also create conflict for the show. And that's one reasons why it works. But one of my biggest issues with it is that I've had plenty of interactions with interfaithing families, many of whom decide that they want to really embrace Judaism as the primary religion. And the non-Jewish partner feels that they've done everything to show that they're a part of the people, except go through the rituals of conversion. And the reason they don't do the rituals of conversion is because it's not for them. And I think that the way in which the show kind of portrays those feelings of all the ritual holidays is like, that is what you need to convert. What I would offer, and I think that what we've been talking about here, is that you don't need to convert to have those feelings and to be connected to the Jewish people and to be connected to this as part of your family. Just like a Jewish individual can feel connected to Easter celebrations, Christmas celebrations, all the going to mass even with their extended family. And they don't have to be Christian, right? You're not expecting them to be able to be there and say like, I am now a Christian, but that I'm part of this family, which is one of the stories that we heard from last season, that it was, I am coming to this event because this is what our family does.
Mm-hmm.
And what's more is that by focusing on this aspect of conversion, like whether you're in or out, it also limits the ability to be able to experience the broad sense of knowledge and learning that you can get by engaging with the multiple traditions that come from both sides of your family. And I know that in many ways, like my own work, especially in this space with you, Anna, is really opening my eyes to a lot of the wisdom that comes from Christianity in ways that I probably never would have thought of if I had stayed sort of within the Jewish realm.
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of give one of those pieces, given what I'm wearing right now, is
Yeah.
like a positive sort of spin on what Santa is all about. I was reading something a while back, and it was a father talking to his son after his son has a question like, "Is Santa real?" And so the father said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you if Santa is real. I'm gonna tell you, if Santa is real. But in order to do that, I need to tell you this story or the story about Santa." And the story that he shared in a kind of a synopsis sort of a way is that when Santa gives a gift to a child, you are able to see, especially as a parent, just the sheer joy, the reaction that comes not because of who gave it, but because of what was given. And being able to see that on their face, knowing that by virtue of it coming from Santa, that the emotion is just real. It just feels right. And what I find so powerful about that is that often when we interact together, it's often about, well, who is responsible for this? Who do I have to thank for whatever it is that I have received? And that Santa Claus kind of brings back a sense of anonymity towards gift giving
Hmm.
that is really precious. And by the way, I see a connection between the Maimonides' ways of giving charity, that anonymity is a very important piece towards being able to give to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. That the reciprocity of some sort of being recognized for the charity or for giving a gift is not the essence of it. It's that you just do it
And it just
and
it's
let the
who you are.
goodness, yeah,
Right.
like and then just let that goodness like exist for the recipient.
And I feel that that piece of sort of the Santa teaching of just the act of giving and receiving in its most natural sense, and of not forcing someone to react to grandma gave it, oh, this is what you gave me, and sort of having to have a forced reaction. I see a connection with the story here, that conversion is often framed in a way of you have to, and then somebody being forced to have to feel something. But what the sister in law does here is it kind of strips that all away and says, and allows Joanna, I think, really for the first time, to just be able to be aware of the gift that she has received, to kind of bring back that sense of wonder and joy about her own experiences without the pressure of how she's forced to or how she should react to it.
Yeah, exactly. In the context of the show, for Joanne, it's also an important recognition that we didn't show it in the clip, but the montage that happens is those are also key moments of the two of them falling in love.
Mm,
And that's an element of her recognition of how she has changed. And, then to say, like, you're right, I don't have to just give up on this relationship because I thought that my conversion was going to look this way and needed to contain XYZ elements. It's her exposure to Judaism is vis-a-vis how she fell in love with Noah.
yeah.
And she
And
doesn't want to give that up.
and by falling in love with Noah,
She fell in
she
love with
fell with
Judaism.
Judaism. Yeah. And I think that that's ultimately like the most amazing thing that could happen for interfaithing families, is that you don't just fall in love with the individual, but you fall in love with everything about that person and
Yeah.
everything about where they come from. You don't need to change who you are in order to be able to love someone else and something else that's special, and to feel a part of it, and to feel that, you are welcome there. You are not a mythical creature like a unicorn who is not present in the world, or a Santa Claus who is only in the North Pole, that you are fully present as you are, and that your partner and their family feels the same about you and your family.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, this has been a beautiful recollection of the show. A lot of fun to wear this. I don't know if Santa will make a return to interfaithing, but interfaithers, if you want to see Santa again, please let us know. And again, we thank you so much for listening, for watching. We look forward to continuing this wonderful work together. We encourage you all to become a part of our growing Patreon interfaithing family, interfaithing community. Go to patreon.com/interfaithing, where again, you can be a part of our Zoom events and of our offerings to help interfaith families along their interfaithing journey, as well as to receive ad-free episodes moving into the future.
Yes, indeed. It's always such a joy. And we hope to see so many of you at the events coming up March 2025. So until then,
Take care
stay curious
and
and
keep
keep
interfaithing.
interfaithing.
Merry Purim, everyone.